Hello everybody, how you guys doing? So, I apologize for not being active on YouTube for the past week because I was recently in Florida. So, excuse me. I was busy, like, vacationing in Florida, so I really wasn't able to record any videos. So, I just wanted to do a daily temperature outlook. I guess that's how I want to call it. So, let's go on windy.com and see what the NAM model has to say about temperatures for 9/28. So as of 9 o'clock a.m., it has 70s and 80s for Florida, and then for parts of the southeast, 60s, maybe even some 50s down the North Carolina and Tennessee mountains. Excuse me. So, excuse me. So for around the DC area, like 60s, 70s, and it's basically in the 60s and 70s for most of the eastern half of the U.S. And there might be even some 50s down in the other part of the eastern U.S. It's pretty warm for Louisiana, 70s. Let's go to the warmest part of the day, which is, I think, like around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's where we have 80s and 90s and 70s for Florida. Excuse me. And there's 70s. Oh, sorry about that. So we have 70s, 80s, pockets of 60s in the eastern half of the U.S. Still some 50s, like down by Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, maybe even some 40s down by the northern part of Wisconsin. But it's usually pretty chilly down by Wisconsin and Minnesota this time of year. And also, Kansas is in the 60s. Denver, like in Colorado, it has some pockets of 30s. Excuse me. 50s, 60s, 40s, pockets of 30s in Colorado. And it has 40s, 50s, and 60s, 70s, maybe even some 80s in Utah. So I would say it's below average for some parts of the country, and it will be pretty average for some other parts of the country. '70s, '80s down in New Jersey, New York City, New England. So yeah, let's move on to the European. Its warmest conditions, it has it in the 70s, 80s, and 60s for parts of the eastern U.S. Like parts of the eastern half of the U.S. There's some pockets of 50s down there too. it's pretty below average for much of Texas. But it's still 90s and 80s for the southern part of Texas. For California, there's 80s, 90s, 70s. Excuse me. 50s. Oops, sorry about that. Maybe lower 60s. Yeah, there's some 50s down there. So it's pretty chilly for most of the country for September 28th. Okay, now let's move on to the GFS. Let's go to thermodynamics, the 2-meter temperature. It looks like it has 50s, 60s, and 70s for the eastern half of the U.S. Maybe even some 40s down in Minnesota. Oops, sorry about that. Up in Minnesota and Wisconsin. But yeah, mainly 60s and 70s for the eastern half of the U.S. For the western half of the U.S., like up in the Rockies and the mountainous regions, there's 20s, 30s. Like basically winter conditions. And then there's 60s, 70s, 80s, 50s, 40s, 60s. Excuse me. God damn, I'm coughing a lot. Sorry about that. So yeah, there's 40s, 50s, 30s. Basically, fall and winter conditions across parts of the western U.S. The southern U.S., it looks pretty average. There's some 70s, 80s, 50s, 30s up towards the northern part of New Mexico. Excuse me. So, yeah, it looks pretty average to slightly or moderately below average for the U.S., for the eastern U.S. So yeah, that's the GFS model. Excuse me. The Canadian model. The Canadian model. It shows basically the similar conditions. It's either average, slightly or moderately below average for the U.S. So yeah, I'm going to conclude this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this temperature outlook for September 28th. And I apologize for stuttering and coughing a lot. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out, YouTube.